Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents War and Peach by Susan Furlong, narrated by Tiffany Morgan. Chapter 1. Southern Girl's Secret, number 45. A Southern gal never starts a fight, but she sure the heck knows how to finish one. I do say, this election business has folks as divided as the states during Mr. Lincoln's war, one of the Crawford sisters was saying. I glanced from one gray-haired sibling to the other and stifled a chuckle. The Crawford sisters were old, but not that old. Although I had to agree with them, our little Georgia town was definitely divided. "And did y'all read the latest issue of the Kay's Mill Reporter?" her sister asked. "Seems the paper's predicting an exciting debate. You're going, aren't you, Nola Mae?" "Of course," I replied, putting on my best shopkeeper's smile as I passed their bag of peach preserves across the counter. Wouldn't miss it for the world. When our esteemed mayor, Wade Marshall, announced his plans to leave his political office to launch a back-road bar tour with his bluegrass band, the Peach Pickers, the political scene in Kay's Mill exploded. In the aftermath, two candidates emerged. Clem Rogers, a local peach farmer who quickly won the support of the agricultural community, and Margie Price, owner of Sunny Side Up Bed and Breakfast, and the favorite contender of local business owners. The sisters exchanged a sly glance before narrowing their eyes on me. "Town folks are wondering just which side you're on," said the older sister. "Sister here says that since you own this new shop and all, you'd be for Miss Price. But I'm betting you're going to stand by your peach farming roots and cast your vote for Clem Rogers." Well, I'm still undecided." "Undecided?" they asked in unison. The younger sister clucked her tongue and shook her head. "What would your daddy say if he heard you talking that way?" Oh, I already knew what he'd say. I'd been hearing it all week. The election had been a point of controversy at our house. Daddy, of course, was all about supporting Clem Rogers, one of our own. Clem had rallied support among most of the local farmers by promising tax cuts for local peach producers. Unfortunately, he planned to engineer those cuts by raising municipal retail taxes, a prospect that business owners like myself worried might send shoppers to nearby Perry or down to Hawkinsville, maybe even up to Macon, to save a few bucks. Still, I was surprised by Daddy's vehement support of Clem Rogers. The two of them had a contentious history that went way back when. I'd never quite known what started their rivalry, but whatever it was, Clem Rogers had been a thorn in Daddy's side ever since. Still, Daddy was backing his candidacy and expected all the Harpers to follow suit. I just wasn't entirely convinced yet that Clem was the man for the job. It was one thing to run a successful farm, another altogether to handle the politics of even a small town like Kay's Mill. The older sister tugged at her sweater and shook her head. "How anyone can vote for an outsider is beyond me. I'm casting my vote for Clem. He may be ornery as an old bulldog, but at least we know what we're getting with him." "That's right, sister," the other agreed. "Miss Price isn't one of us. How's she supposed to know our ways?" A few years back, Margie Price, owner of the Sunny Side Up Bed and Breakfast, had moved from somewhere up north and bought a neglected, dilapidated antebellum home over on Majestic Boulevard. She'd spent over a year painstakingly restoring every inch of the three-story home to its original glory and was now running a successful inn. To me, she'd more than proven herself an asset to the community, but to many she'd always be considered an outsider, or worse yet, a Yankee. "Well, maybe someone with a fresh perspective would be a good thing for our town," I offered, struggling to maintain my smile. I knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. After more than a few youthful indiscretions, I had fled Kay's Mill and embarked on a career as a humanitarian aid worker. My job took me to some of the most remote areas of the world and immersed me in cultures so different from my own southern roots that I often felt like an outsider. I'd felt that way again, more recently, upon my return to Kay's Mill, as I struggled to reinsert myself into this tight little community. Sure, Kay's Mill was a wonderful place to grow up, but the people here, my own family included, were so rooted in culture and tradition they were sometimes slow to be accepting of others. "What on earth are you talking about, Nola Mae?" the older sister asked. "Fresh ideas? Why, everything's been just fine the way it is. There's nothing around here that needs changing." "Could be," the other sister jumped in, "that all that traveling Nola's done has made her forget her roots and what's important." I shook my head. "Now, both of you know that's not true. I've always been grateful for my raising. I came back, didn't I?" I waved my hand through the air, taking in the expanse of my shop with its rustic country charm and displays of peachy products. "And I opened this place to help my family." The sisters exchanged glances and nodded. "That's true, dear, but you've always been one of us. You understand how it is round here, just like Clem Rogers does. Why, that boy's been living here his whole life." "That's right, living here his whole life," her sister echoed. "I was good friends with his grandmama, rest her soul. She made the best peach pie. Always said it's best to use yellow peaches, not white peaches. The white ones are too sweet. Did you know that, Nola?" I breathed a sigh of relief, glad the conversation had shifted from politics and my apparently inflammatory, too worldly concept of fresh perspectives back to something neutral. Peaches. "Yellow peaches, for sure," I nodded, recognizing a sales opportunity. "Which is why, being that it's November and all, and since there aren't any fresh peaches available for pie, I put up some of the best canned spiced yellow peaches you'd ever want to taste." I came out from around the counter and directed their attention toward the far wall of shelves, which held several straight rows of bright yellow peaches in sparkling jars. "We always heat them and serve with a dollop of vanilla ice cream, my Nana's recipe," I added in a conspiratorial whisper, which garnered an appreciative smile from the women. "Then they must be good," the older sister said, reaching back into her bag for her pocketbook. "We'll take a couple of those, too. Then we better get going. We want to have time to get some supper before the town hall meeting tonight." My focus quickly shifted out the front windows and across the street to the courthouse lawn, where I noticed a man unloading folding chairs from the Baptist Church's minibus. They must have needed to borrow extra seating for the meeting. "Looks like it's going to be a big crowd," I said, ringing up and packaging their additional purchase. "Hopefully people will remain civil tonight." I was referring to the last debate held in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce's monthly luncheon. After several rounds of heated bantering about who should carry the tax burden, the farmers or the business owners, Doris Wortleby, the owner of the Clip and Curl salon, got so mad she stood up and chucked a chicken leg across the room at Harley Corbin, who, in retaliation, slung a spoonful of potato salad her way, and on until a full-fledged food fight was underway. What a mess! The oldest Crawford sister leaned across the counter, an unmistakably mischievous glimmer in her blue eyes. "Don't bet on it, Nola. Rumor has it that Clem Rogers is going to drop a bombshell tonight, something that's going to change everyone's opinion about Miss Price." "Really? What could that be?" Margie was an honest businesswoman and always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. I couldn't imagine what Clem would have to say that could possibly change everyone's opinion of such a wonderful person. "Who told you about this?" I asked. The older sister dipped her chin my way. "Why, everyone in town is talking about it, dear. Supposedly, it's something that has to do with Margie's past. She's from up north, you know." "And," the other sister added, "haven't you ever wondered what brought Miss Price all the way down here in the first place? She doesn't have any kin in the area." I shrugged. I just assumed she'd stumbled upon a good business opportunity with a bed and breakfast. The sisters harumphed in unison. "Not likely," one of them said. "There's more to that woman than just business, and whatever this bombshell is, it's going to be big. Why, even Frances Sims said she thinks it's going to be big news. She's planning a special edition this week." Now I did roll my eyes. Frances Sims was the editor of the Kaysmill Reporter, our town's one and only source for breaking gossip. News. Normally, the paper released every Tuesday and Saturday, but something really big might spur the printing of a special edition. Although, I only remember it happening one time before, and that was when Bobby Tyndale picked the winning numbers for the Georgia Powerball lottery. Thanks to the Kaysmill Reporter, the news of his $11 million win spread so fast the poor guy couldn't walk down the street without someone holding their palm out. Finally, he ended up packing it in and leaving town. I certainly hoped Frances would exercise more prudence this time around. Of course, Frances wasn't known for her prudence, a fact I'd learned the hard way. Once, when she published a series of innuendos that almost resulted in a lifelong prison term for my brother-in-law, and another time when she published a completely biased story that turned my good friend Jenny into an overnight social outcast. "You certainly don't believe everything you read in the newspaper, do you?" I countered, especially not the Kaysmill Reporter. The sisters exchanged a glance. "Well, of course we do," one of them said, giving me an incredulous stare. "It's the newspaper, after all." Then she turned to her sister. "Come along, sister. If we don't get home and get supper fixed, we'll miss that meeting, and it's supposed to be the biggest barn burner this town's ever seen." The enticing smell of Mama's cooking wafted through the screen door and greeted me as I mounted the steps of our front porch. As I did every evening, I paused and leaned against one of the posts, letting my eyes wander over our farm. Autumn was one of my favorite times of year. Summer was behind us, along with the hard labor and pressures of the harvest season, the fruit long ago packed and shipped. Then, late summer brought the Peach Harvest Festival, where we celebrated our successes and oftentimes placated our losses in the company of good neighbors and family. Now, in November, things had finally settled down, the cooler night air bringing relief to the burdensome heat of summer and the heavy workload of the previous seasons. Of course, there was still a lot to be done. Mowing, pruning and fertilizing, planting new trees, record-keeping and strategizing for the next season, but for the most part, life on the farm had slowed to a manageable pace, a time to catch our breath and count our blessings. Blessings were something I'd had plenty of lately. We'd enjoyed a bountiful harvest, punctuated by a surge in peach prices that resulted in enough to cover our operating costs, plus some to sock away for harder times. And my new shop, Peachy Keen, was experiencing success beyond my imagination. Not only had foot traffic picked up in the storefront, but online orders had almost doubled. With Christmas quickly approaching, I was hoping to see even more sales, especially with the addition of a new line of peachy gift baskets. And to top it all off, my personal life was on the upswing. Just recently, My friend Hattie had asked me to be the maid of honor for her upcoming wedding to Pete Sanchez, love of her life and owner of Pistol Pete's flower shop. They were perfectly suited for each other, and I was so happy for them. Best of all, my relationship with Hattie's brother, Cade, was blossoming. After working through a few minor hitches last spring, we had started seeing each other on a regular basis. With all the excitement over Hattie's wedding lately, I couldn't help but dream a little about the day Cade and I might... Well, maybe I wasn't ready for all that. But I was happy. In fact, the past year or so since my return to Kay's Mill had proven to be one of the best times in my life. Except for the murders, that is. I shuddered, squeezed my eyes shut, inhaled the smell of wood smoke, probably a neighbor burning off his recent pruning, and exhaled the unpleasant memories of the murders that had occurred over the past year, one right here on Harper land. "Nola Mae, is that you?" The sound of my mama's southern drawl cut through my thoughts. "Come on inside. We're waiting supper for you." "Coming, Mama." Inside, I found my parents sitting at the table, 3 red and white checked placemats already set with plates and silverware. In the center of the table rested a large platter of chicken fried steak, flanked on either side by a bowl of greens and a nearly overflowing gravy boat. Mama was pouring from a sweating pitcher of iced tea. I leaned in and gave Daddy a quick peck on the cheek, inhaling his familiar scent of spent cigars and perhaps a touch of Peach Jack whiskey before settling into my spot. "Looks good, Mama." Of course, if Mama made it, it was good. For as long as I could remember, people had been talking about my mother's skill as a cook. In fact, it was her famous peach preserve recipe that inspired and made Peachy Keen the success it was today. "How'd things go at the shop, hun?" she asked. "Busy. I'm going to need to make a few more batches of preserves if I'm going to cover my online orders and the extra business in the shop. Chutney's selling well, too." "It's the cooler weather," Mama commented. "Ladies are making more pork roasts. Y'all know how well peach chutney goes with pork." I nodded, casting a glance toward my father. "You're quiet this evening, Daddy. Everything going okay?" He grumbled, but didn't bother looking up from his plate. "Never mind him," Mama said, reaching again for the tea pitcher and topping off her glass. "He's had a bad day." I put down my fork. "What happened? Something with the orchards?" "No, nothing like that," Daddy said, pushing his own food around his plate. "A problem with Snyder's." "Snyder's fruit stand? I don't understand. What's going on?" The Snyders ran one of the largest produce stands in the county. A couple seasons back, Daddy negotiated a sweet deal with Jack Snyder. He gave Daddy a higher % of profit than we'd normally get at other stands on all the bushels of fresh peaches we could provide. In exchange, the Snyder stand got the best of our crop. It was an exclusive deal, and we were his only supplier, which meant a sure-thing market for our highest quality peaches. Plus, we didn't have to pack and ship, which saved even more money. Rumor had it that Jack hoped to open other stands in nearby counties as well, though so far it was just a rumor. From across the table, Mama let out a long sigh. "Raymond, is it really necessary to talk business at the dinner table?" Daddy waved her off. "Seems Clem Rogers stole the contract from under our noses. Snyder said Clem offered a better deal, 10% less retail than we've been getting. I'm not even sure how Clem can afford to do business that way." "I don't either. Sounds like he deliberately undercut you." Daddy shoved his plate away and leaned back in his chair. "Wouldn't surprise me. Clem Rogers bears a grudge." "For what? Whatever happened between the two of you anyway?" I asked. Mama and Daddy exchanged a quick look, but offered no explanation. I sighed. For as long as I could remember, there had been contention between Clem Rogers and my father. and most of it coming from Clem, in my opinion. Once he cut off our water supply by diverting the small branch of the Okmulgee River that ran through our property and provided our irrigation water. Thank goodness my brother Ray, a local attorney, was able to talk some sense into the man, but not before some of our trees were damaged. Then there was the time Clem ousted Daddy for the coveted role of General Lee in the local Civil War reenactment. Didn't think Daddy would ever survive that disappointment. He did so love to ride into battle on Traveler, the horse, and scream the rebel yell. Now this thing, with Snyder's fruit stand, just one more of Clem's dirty deeds. "Did you try talking to Snyder again, to change his mind?" Mama was asking. "Yes, but he wasn't around by then. But I couldn't let it rest, so I stopped in at Clem's. Just got back from his place a while ago. We had a few words, none of them good, I'm afraid." She shook her head. "I just can't figure that man. So bitter. And to think you've been supporting him in his race for mayor." Daddy shrugged. "Who should I support? Some city slicker with big ideas?" "You're not being very nice, Raymond," Mama admonished. "Margie Price may not be from this area, but she's a very nice woman. Why, I was just at her place yesterday for afternoon tea, and it was quite pleasant." Daddy placed his elbows up on the table and waved his fork as he spoke. "All I'm saying, Della, is that Clem's a farmer, just like us. We want someone in office who'll protect farmers' interests. I don't think your friend Margie is the best woman for the job." "Yeah, but what about our interests?" I wanted to know. "Clem's definitely not supporting us. Sounds like he wants to put us out of business." "It's just one small fraction of our distribution list, Nola. It's not like it's going to hurt us all that much. Besides, there's other fresh fruit markets out there. I'll get another deal going with one of them." He sighed and started pushing his chair back from the table. "Where are you going?" Mama demanded. "Sit back down and eat something." She glanced over our plates. "Both of you need to eat. All this good food's going to waste." Daddy stood and looked back. "Sorry, dear. Afraid I don't have much of an appetite right now. I'm going to look over some paperwork in my den for a while. Call me when it's time to leave for the meeting." I watched as he retreated to the safe haven of his den, a place where he stored his worries, right along with a full box of cigars and a bottle of peach jack. I imagined he was going in there now to relieve some of this latest stress with a quick tip of a shot glass. I turned back to my own plate, speared a piece of meat, and slid it through a smudge of gravy before popping it into my mouth. Guess we all have our special ways to mollify stress. Daddy's was partaking in liberations, while I preferred to drown my worries with gravy, grits, or any other southern delish Mama cooked up. "The gravy is perfect tonight, Mama, and there's a little kick to the chicken fried steak. Did you do something different?" She smiled with pleasure at the compliment. "Added a little Cajun spice to the flour." "Well, I love it." I was about to spear another piece when we heard the sound of sirens coming down the road. "What in the—" Mama popped out of her seat and ran out to the porch. I followed on her heels, the screen door slapping shut behind us. "Sounds like fire trucks," she said, scanning the horizon. We couldn't see the main road from our house, so there was no telling which direction the trucks were heading. "I don't see any smoke. Do you?" The screen door screeched open again as Daddy joined us. "See anything?" The early evening sun was quickly setting, making it difficult to see much of anything. "No," I answered, still searching. Then I spotted it. A small plume of black smoke rising above the peach orchards. "There! I see it!" I cried, pointing north. For a few seconds, we all stood frozen, staring at the cloud of smoke and silence before Daddy jumped into action. "Looks like it's coming from Clem Rogers' land. Come on, let's go." I held on tight as our farm truck roared down the gravel drive and turned out onto the main road, dust and pebbles flying out from under the wheels. "You don't suppose it's Clem's house, do you?" Mama asked, her brows furrowed with worry. The Rogers had settled in this area even before the Harpers, and their home, built in the early 1800s, had survived the Civil War. What a shame if that beautiful old home caught fire. "Let's just hope no one's hurt," Daddy said, taking a wild turn off the main road onto the country lane that ran between our properties. "Maybe he's just burning off some old wood scraps, cleaning up the place," I said, hopefully. But as we neared Clem's land, those hopes were dashed by the bright red and orange flames licking the air like a hungry lizard. Thankfully, they weren't coming from Clem's house, but his barn. Mama's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, no! What a shame! Looks like the whole barn will be lost." We got out of the truck and squinted through the smoky air. I watched the water from the firefighters' hoses as it arched across the sky in a seemingly futile effort to quell the angry flames engulfing the structure. Next to me, Mama was pointing and saying something, but her soft voice was drowned out by the popping and crackling of burning wood and the roar of the oxygen-hungry fire. Not that it mattered, because the only thing I could hear were the words playing over and over in my own mind, the very words I'd heard one of the Crawford sisters say earlier that day when she referred to tonight's debate. A real barn burner. Chapter 2. Southern Girl Secret number 60. There are only 2 reasons someone new comes into your life. They're either going to be a blessing or a lesson. "Where's Clem?" I asked, my eyes wandering to the front of the house where Clem's truck was parked next to the small crowd of onlookers who were starting to gather in the front yard. The local law, Sheriff Maudie Payne, and her deputy, Travis Hines, were busy keeping the order. Frances Sims was also there, buzzing around, snapping pictures and interviewing bystanders. My eyes darted back to the parked truck, but I didn't see Clem anywhere, and a horrible thought occurred. "Clem's truck is here. You don't suppose—" "Nah," Daddy said. "When I left him this afternoon, he said he was heading into town. He wanted to get to the courthouse early to check on things before the big meeting." I breathed a sigh of relief. "That's good. He must have taken his car." Like most farmers in the area, Clem drove a half-ton, 4-wheel drive pickup truck, but he'd also recently purchased some type of fancy new car. Not that I'd seen him driving it, but I'd heard enough talk around town to know it was something expensive, really expensive. That's the thing about Kay's Mill. Stuff like that gets noticed. Heck, just a couple months ago, Mama had a new couch delivered from the furniture store over in Perry. Before the delivery guys could even plunk it in the front room, there was a knock on the door. It was Betty Lou Nix from the church, just passing by, of course. Mama, who's ever so house-proud and never put off by unexpected visitors, kindly invited her in and served her iced tea right there in the front room on her new Davenport. By that very afternoon, word was out that the Harpers had bought a new piece of furniture. As crazy as it sounds, that new couch of ours quickly became talk of the town. "I'm sure that's it," Mama said. "He probably wanted to impress everyone with that new car of his." She turned her palm up and glanced at the watch she always wore turned to the inside of her wrist. "It's already close to 6. Poor man, he probably has no idea that he's even lost his barn. At least we know he doesn't have any animals that might be trapped inside." Next to her, Daddy and I nodded. That was true. Clem had never kept animals, not even an old barn cat to keep him company. which was kind of odd considering most of the farms I knew included a cat or two, a dog, or even a few chickens. Suddenly, the sound of spitting gravel caused us to look over our shoulders. A shiny new black sedan was speeding down the drive. "There's Clem now," my father said, but stopped short when the car screeched to a halt.
"Sample complete. Ready to continue?"